Welcome to the Fact Hunter channel. In today's episode, we will try to answer the still unexplained question: did Stalin know and was getting information about the start of the invasion against Russia by Hitler and the day of the start of Operation Barbarossa? Stalin, misled in the field loser. For 2 days, more than 3 million Wehrmacht soldiers took cover in the dark forests with tanks and other vehicles along the 3,000-kilometer-long Soviet border. They arrived there, driving with their lights out, on the night of June 19–20, 1941. During the day, they had to be stuck in stillness, maintaining absolute silence. The jawing of an opening tank hatch was enough to make the unit commander explode with anger. Only when darkness fell could the German soldiers sneak off after a few to nearby streams or other water sources to wash themselves. Each tank, and there were thousands of them, stood in full combat ready, with 10 fuel tanks attached to the armor, and each also towed a trailer with additional barrels. They were prepared for a long trip, and indeed a long journey awaited them to Moscow itself, more than 1,500 kilometers to the east. In a matter of hours or so, Adolf Hitler's war machine was about to embark on Operation Barbarossa, the most powerful offensive in all of history to date. The Führer himself, from his new headquarters hidden in a dense forest near Ketrazin in East Prussia, was preparing to give the order to attack. As H-hour, the hour of the attack, approached, Hitler became more and more excited. "When Barbarossa begins, the world will hold its breath," he announced to his generals. Far to the east, behind the walls of the Moscow Kremlin, Joseph Stalin, undeniably one of the most suspicious representatives of the human race, seemed to ignore the obvious fact that along the entire western border, from Finland in the north to the Black Sea in the south, a deadly threat to the Soviet Union was growing. He did so despite the numerous and fully reliable intelligence reports to which he had access. Never before in modern history has a nation's leader received so much information about a threatened invasion from a hostile power. Less than 3 months earlier, Winston Churchill had tried to warn Stalin of the impending danger. A top-secret dispatch sent April 3rd to the Soviet leader sounded: Prime Minister to Sir Stafford Cripps, British Ambassador in Moscow. Please convey from me to Joseph Stalin the following. Having taken care that the message be delivered personally by you, I have received verified information from a trusted agent that the Germans intend to move 5 armored divisions from Romania to southern Poland over the Soviet border. Your Excellency will no doubt appreciate the significance of these facts. Surprisingly, People's Commissar of Foreign Affairs Vyacheslav Molotov, to whom Ambassador Cripps handed Churchill's warning, did not relay this extremely important message to Stalin until 3 weeks later, on April 22nd. Churchill did not disclose to Stalin that the trusted agent was in fact ultra. It had intercepted and deciphered hundreds of Wehrmacht orders, testifying conclusively that Hitler was amassing a huge force over the Soviet border. Stalin, for his part, derided Churchill's warnings. Less than 2 years earlier, on August 23, 1939, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin had signed a German-Soviet non-aggression pact. Stalin was convinced that the deceitful Churchill, a fierce enemy of communism, was not disguising his efforts to bring about a rift between Berlin and Moscow. Soon disturbing signals, confirming Churchill's warning, began to reach the Kremlin from other parts of the world as well. One of the coded reports came from Richard Sorge, who was in Tokyo as the Far East correspondent for the Frankfurter Zeitung, the largest daily newspaper in the Third Reich. Sorge had long been on the payroll of the Soviet intelligence service. In Japan, Sorge developed a cordial friendship with Colonel Eugen Ott, the Führer's deputy to the Mikado court. Ott maintained close contacts with members of the Imperial General Staff, from whom he obtained top-secret information, often sharing it with his old friend Richard Sorge, who was, Ott believed, a loyal German. Thus, on May 19, 1941, Sorge sent a message to Moscow's Kremlin that Hitler was concentrating 9 field armies along the Soviet border, the actual number, with a total of 150 divisions. In fact, there were 3 divisions more. Less than 2 weeks later, Sorge transmitted to Moscow detailed information on the strategy the Wehrmacht would employ to bring the Soviet Union to its knees. A few days later, a correspondent for the Frankfurter Zeitung reported the exact date of the German attack, June 22, 1941. Soon, even more disturbing signals from Switzerland began to reach the Kremlin. A Soviet spy network, led by Rudolf Rösler, a German émigré who ran a bookstore in Lucerne as a screen, was using radio stations camouflaged in Geneva and Lausanne to relay reports directly to Moscow. To the German Secret Service, these radio stations were known as the Red Trio. On June 14th, and again on June 16th, 17 and 18, The radio stations broadcast long, detailed ciphertexts based on excellent information gathered by the mysterious Rudolf Rosler, using the pseudonym Lucy. The three musicians, as Lucy's group was called in Moscow, not only conveyed the strategic assumptions of the Barbarossa plan, the exact number of tanks, distributed among the three army groups, North, Central and South, but also confirmed the date of the invasion. Later, they still gave the exact targets of the Wehrmacht, and even the names of all senior officers, up to the level of corps commander. When radio operator Lucy ended the long night transmission and collapsed exhausted on his bed, the only answer Moscow gave was, "Accepted." The end. There were other clues, indicating that the German armed forces were preparing for a massive strike. On June 18th, a Wehrmacht deserter sneaked across the border into the Soviet Union and revealed that the German offensive would begin on June 22nd. Again, Stalin disregarded this alarming signal. Other peculiar events also seemed to embarrass Soviet intelligence. In the 2 months preceding the invasion, Luftwaffe planes violated Soviet airspace 24 times, although Berlin and Moscow were formally bound by an alliance. One of the planes crashed. High-precision cameras were found on its deck. The resulting films left not the slightest doubt that the primary purpose of the mission was to photograph Soviet military installations along the border. What's more, some economic facts could also be interpreted as evidence that Adolf Hitler was looking at the Soviet Union with the eye of a future conqueror. In the 3 months preceding the attack, German companies, which had signed trade agreements with Moscow on January 10th of the previous year, suddenly stopped sending their goods to the Soviet Union. OTAG, Day Zero, for the Barbarossa plan was approaching. Hitler's soldiers, waiting in hiding along the border, were in excellent shape and hoped to prevail where Napoleon Bonaparte had failed in 1812. In distant Washington, gray-haired, courteous Secretary of State Cordell Hull summoned Soviet Ambassador Konstantin Umansky and warned him that rumors of a planned Wehrmacht invasion of the Soviet Union had reached American diplomatic missions in Europe. Finally, Winston Churchill warned Stalin that the British had learned from excellent sources, he meant ultra, when the German assault would begin on June 21st. Although Churchill once described communism as the abhorrent exploits of a herd of baboons, he had good reason to warn the man whom Western allies called Uncle Joe. If Hitler had attacked hell, the Prime Minister confessed with disarming frankness to his personal secretary, "I would have expressed myself favorably about the devil in the House of Commons." Amid the eerie silence of pre-dawn on Day Zero, thousands of German guns thundered across the 3,000-kilometer-long border, showering Soviet territory with an avalanche of steel. Shortly thereafter, the German armies, numbering 3 million troops, launched an assault. The Russians were taken completely by surprise. 2 hours later, at 6 a.m., as Wehrmacht armored divisions were pushing deep into Russia, Friedrich Count von der Schulenburg, the German ambassador to Moscow, handed People's Commissar of Foreign Affairs Molotov a significant document. It was a cynical declaration of war, containing, among other things, this paragraph. "Information received over the past few days by the Reich government leaves no doubt as to the aggressive character of Soviet troop movements. The Reich government believes that the Soviet government's violation of its own solemn obligations clearly indicates that it has been making open and contradictory preparations for an attack on Germany in violation of the German-Soviet non-aggression pact. In this situation, the Führer ordered the armed forces of the Reich to stop the existing threat by all available means." Pale, tense, silent Commissar Molotov accepted the document, spat on it, tore it up, and summoned Poskreshev, his trusted secretary. "Please take this man out, through the back exit," he growled. The speed of the German advance was breathtaking. Hundreds of Soviet aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Midavijur, Idabijur, Midavijur. Surprised Russians were going into captivity en masse. On the very first day, Brest-Litovsk, a key point in the Soviet defense system, fell. Confused, lacking clear orders, stunned Soviet commanders asked one another over the radio, "They are shooting at us. What should we do? Are they shooting? Who? The Germans, damn it. You must be crazy. Why do you send such reports unencrypted? Do you want to start a war?" Plan Barbarossa was a huge success. In its first phase, about 3 million Soviet soldiers It is even questionable whether Sorge and Rosler even knew of each other's existence. Summing up the whole story brings up a question. Was there a German sympathizer, perhaps even a spy, in the Soviet Supreme Command? Why did Molotov hold on to Churchill's urgent April 3 telegram for almost 3 weeks before showing it to Stalin? What happened to a very telling film taken from a crashed Luftwaffe plane? These questions may never be answered. What is certain is that Uncle Joe Stalin let himself be caught with his pants down.